So this is some of the early making of Genghis Khan's tribe, like his early power grab, I guess you could say. Having received the support he deemed sufficient to function as the Khan of a minor group, Temujin began a radical process of erecting a novel power structure within his tribe, calling on the lessons of his youth for guidance. A chief's complex of gurs that served as his tribal center or his chiefly court was called an ordu or horde. So that's where the golden horde comes from. So it's a group of huts. A gur is a home. So it's a group of homes that serve as your tribe. In most steppe peoples, the Khan's ordu, or horde, consisted of his relatives and served as a sort of aristocracy over the tribe, managing it and leading it. Temujin, however, assigned some dozen responsibilities to various followers according to the ability and loyalty of the individual without regard to kinship. He gave the highest positions as his personal assistants to his first two followers, Orchu and Jelm, who had shown persistent loyalty to him for more than a decade. Temujin Khan exercised a decisive ability to assess a man's talents and assign him to precisely the right task based on his ability rather than his genealogy. So this is definitely an advancement in organization, because the longest time aristocracies had to only use their kinmen. And so like the next king would be the eldest son. Even if the eldest son was an idiot, he was incompetent, he was unhealthy, it didn't matter. But Genghis Khan is breaking with kinship, because kinship, you get a random assortment of people. And you can't even depend on your kinmen to be loyal. They can stab you in the back, right? So Genghis Khan, or Temujin at this point, he is picking people based on history and associations. Returning to the idea of smell being very important, it was also important for dealing with enemies. You'd like to smell your friends and your lovers, but you do not want to smell the enemy. This is one of the reasons why the steppe peoples fought on horseback with arrows, to be away from the enemy. So it says here, when fighting, the steppe warriors sought to avoid being splattered by blood, so they rarely fought close to one another in hand-to-hand combat. The breath or odor of the enemy carried a part of his soul, and thus warriors sought to avoid the contamination of even smelling their enemy. The attackers swarmed down toward their enemy on horseback, firing arrows rapidly as they approached. Here's another interesting part. Genghis Khan, I think, gets injured in one of his early battles as he's trying to get control of the Mongol Empire. And I guess he goes out, he loses consciousness, and then he regains consciousness, and he wants to drink what's called arak, which is fermented mare's milk. I don't know what that would taste like. Fermented, meaning mare's milk. I guess kind of like an eggnog, but worse than that. And so he gets one of his assistants, so his most trusted people, it says here, he stripped off his clothes, slipped across the battlefields, this is his assistant, and walked naked among the enemy soldiers in search of arak. For a Mongol, public nakedness is a great sign of debasement, and had one of the Tericht, which is the other tribe, seen him going through the camp naked at night, they probably would have assumed that he was one of their own getting up to relieve himself. Out of politeness, they probably would have looked away for fear of shaming one of their own warriors. Had they looked carefully and recognized him, Jelm planned to claim that he had just been stripped and humiliated by his fellow Mongols and had escaped to the Tericht, which is this tribe. They would probably have believed him because of the unlikelihood that any proud Mongol warrior would intentionally allow himself to be captured naked. Another point about a war he's fighting now with the Naaman. So he's increasing his power by fighting these little tribes. It says here that he had far fewer soldiers than the Naaman. So what he did is that Temujin ordered each man to set 5 campfires every night on the hills where his army camped. Each man to set 5 campfires. From a distance, the small army appeared much larger, since they seemed to have more fires than the stars in the sky. It says here that the steppe peoples were in general disorganized, especially in fighting. They're just on horses and they just run around and do whatever they want and just try to shoot people, right? But Temujin uniquely organized his troops and produced various tactics. It says here that Temujin had produced a new type of steppe army based on a great variety of tactics and, most important, close cooperation among the men and complete obedience to their commanders. They were no longer an attacking swarm of individuals. They were now a united formation. So eventually, as he's getting more and more territory, it says here that he now ranked an undisputed ruler of a vast land controlling everything from the Gobi to the south, the Gobi Desert, to the Arctic tundra to the north, from the Manchurian forest to the east, to the Alta mountains of the west. His empire was grass and contained far more animals than humans. Also, you might have heard of throat singing, and this is a steppe people's kind of music. It says, the night air filled with the mesmerizing drone of the distinctive type of Mongolian throat singing or overtone singing, in which men make sounds from so deep inside their bodies that they can follow two music lines simultaneously. And you can look that up on YouTube if you want. Look up throat singing. And there's various kinds of it, but it tends to be a steppe people thing and kind of somewhat China and Tibet, but more like steppe people stuff.